I asked everybody in the class not to ask me too many questions, but to save the questions for you tonight. After your talk, maybe they will ask you about what you're talking about and also about the film. We've been basically meeting now for almost 2 months in a series of lectures, and now in person. I'm in Prague, well, not right now, but today, this morning I was. And it's a special course at the Art Academy of Prague. It's a kind of like a special masterclass for visiting artists. And basically the idea is that it's basically quite open. So I was free to set a curriculum for it. And we're basically doing the entire course on cosmism, yeah. And I think, you know, from our discussions now, the last few days, there is some desire to do a collective project with all of the participants of this course, and maybe we will make an experimental play or even a kind of a film or something like that. Pelin Tann is a sociologist and art historian, a professor at Batman University, and somebody that I have been collaborating with for so many years, probably since 2005 in one way or another, in very many different capacities, by way of discursive projects, by way of publishing her writings in the Flex Journal, and also we work together on films. So we've been working together on films for actually quite a long time, since 2012, I think, or 2011 even, yeah? Yeah. So this is a kind of a very long-standing relationship. And when we decided to make Gilgamesh, and we decided to make it in the region where she lives, which is southeast Turkey, around the cities of Mardin, Diyarbakir, Batman, Hasan Cave, and other areas. Basically, if it wasn't for Pelin, I would have never found this part of the world. I would have never had the kind of network of relations with people who live there that would allow to make such a film, you know, because in the end, all of this is incredibly personal. And besides being an academic and a researcher, Pelin is kind of an incredible builder of a community. She has a whole army of people that are supporting her in the region and are very happy to help on art projects and research projects. And this is something very, very unusual. So this is kind of another side of her practice that I guess she doesn't talk about very much, but it's so important, I think, because it enables very complex things, yeah. So maybe this is kind of like enough of an introduction, and I'll pass it to you. Pelin, I just want to say one thing. We're setting up for a screening. We're also going to show Gilgamesh in Bratislava today at the small artistron space, and there are some technical difficulties. I may have to step away from Zoom at some point. Please do not mind. Yeah, thank you. Yeah.
No problem. Thank you very much.
Okay.
I thank you for the introduction and for the invite. And I would like, I prepared the presentation, but my talk, what I had in my mind, I was thinking a lot because I wanted to do everything. Maybe talk about the region and what is going on, and make a connection with current contemporary discussion, but at the same time tell a story at the end that how you all can better understand maybe or make more relation with the film. So it's not about a presentation of Gilgamesh, but is about Gilgamesh, let's say. I will share a screen, and I'm living here since 2013, and there was a special reason that I moved to this region. This is where I am. Is Mardin, Batman here, this blue dot, I'm here right now. I was doing a photo and just, so Batman, Diyarbakir, Mardin, and Nusaybin is here. And then there is Syria, and further up is Iraq. So the region is important because everything is about here. The reason even that we moved with some of my friends with academic purpose, trying to find new teaching possibilities, but also establish a new institution. and the whole thing was informed that this is a region that is under conflict and physical internal war. Especially, it was very. I remember when I was in the university in the end of 90s, it was really violent. And I visited several times in 2003, 2004, Mardin, but I never thought I was going to live there one day. This region is basically, historically speaking, Upper Mesopotamia, and is south east Turkey, the region, unofficially northern Kurdistan. Officially that, unofficially this. So the region is really like has a lot of references and it's very much related with many social and political history of this region. There are linear historical stories that is coming from Ottoman Empire to the end of the 19th century. There were Assyrian Arabs, like Christian Arabs, we call them Assyrian. The city of Mardin is an Assyrian city, actually, and now is very assimilated, is Kurdish, assimilated by Kurds, and Diyarbakir is somehow the capital of Kurdish society in Turkey. And there were many Armenians. I mean, the whole villages here were Armenians originally, and of course they are all either forced to leave or killed during the genocide 1915. And before there were many genocides. So it's a kind of also a landscape, so beautiful landscape, is a kind of has a hidden history of violence and massacre. It is very difficult to understand at the first hand, but I want to come back in the beginning why we moved here. There was a moment in 2013, 2012, Turkish government and PKK, Kurdish Liberation Freedom Movement, decided to remain they negotiated in remaining. I don't want to say, we call it peace process in Turkish that time. It was called peace agreement, but it was kind of agreement that they won't attack each other. And it was a very nice moment that time. Now, after 2016, I think it lasted 4 years, and after it failed. And but this reason was somehow to move and start education in art and architecture in order to contribute the region. I wouldn't say that this kind of move, looking from practical and architectural practice and teaching pedagogical level, is colonial, although we are all white Turk, coming from West, and having, I mean, Sunni Muslim, no ethical, ethnical identity, that is mostly the community, the lead that has been managed, not only Turkey, but before Ottoman Empire too. And I mean, shortly, it was managed always by Sunni Turks, which were actually more minority comparable to other minorities. But I think they had always this war and military aim. And it, after even empire, 1923, when Turkey established a nation state, it didn't change so much. Anyway, I titled my presentation Tigris Phenomenologies. The reason for that is I'm working on that since 2 years, to think the river of Tigris, not a kind of a water element only, but a kind of a element, a phenomenological element, that gives different kind of understanding, meaning, and symbols, and possibilities of telling the histories, possibilities of telling the future, anticipating the future of the communities that are living around the river. The river has a very literal symbol in literature, especially in Kurdish literature I discovered lately. It was not something that I knew when I was young or child or something, but it is important that the cities around where Tigris starts from above Diyarbakir and goes until Old Uruk and lower Mesopotamia. It follows like Nile in Africa, host many cities and many histories, and this is why it has a kind of, for me also, a metaphorical meaning that I can play in a poetic way, but at the same time to think as an academic, how and why in recent discussions, maybe if you follow in artistic research and methodology related to question of knowledge production and questions and research on methodology of artistic research, how we can go back a new approach of phenomenology that is a bit different than the 20th century, let's say, French understanding of phenomenology, how we can understand, I mean, it becoming, especially with Karen Barat and so on, with many new queer philosophers, it's becoming more non-human experience of methodology. And what does it mean in science? What does it mean in social science? What does it mean in artistic research? So I'm also trying to understand, and this is why I called many phenomenologies, many way of sensing, not in a not romantic and pastoralistic way, but sensing in a really queering the knowledge, what we know about landscape, infrastructure, violence, flora, cities, communities, and so on, and so on, and so on. Just to remind you where we are, there is also not only Tigris, I mean, Fırat, this river is also very important in Turkey, and also in the Kurdish literature, in the Arabic literature, like Anatolian, Levant, like kind of, let's say, East Mediterranean informed literature is very important. I have to do a lot of geographical when you speak about the concept, the geographical dimension, and everything change continuously, and this is also nice to revert and to play with the knowledge, I think. Also there are some word and concept that I think it's important. I just covered what I'm interested in, what I'm working, and also what does matter in this region, and also how, for example, the film Gilgamesh can be informed and looked in that way. But here, more than speaking about the film, it's for me is interesting is the research to reach the film, I think, and after the film, about the research, how we can research differently, how we can use film as a research method itself, rather than a end product, or an artwork, an ended artwork to show how moving image, how we understand moving image nowadays in the last 20 years, how it differs from what, I mean, not differs, but what are the possibilities telling what we want to say about, for me especially, about social and political issues, contemporary issues, in a speculative realist way, in a very 20th century realistic way, or in a kind of ethnographic way, you know, how we look to ethnographic film nowadays, why is different, how we can understand differently than colonial ethnographic moving image, and so on. There are so many issues when we dive into moving image, what we are searching in the last years, and what is informed, what is the history in the 20th century. We are focusing a lot, especially I have a research collective, architects. I work a lot with architects, and here in the region from Diyarbakır, Mardin, Batman, Nusaybin. I have members, architects of my research group collective that we are working since 2016, visually mapping the Tigris River around the river, and from the river and from the move, from different parts. And this is why conceptually Elizabeth Povinelli's term geontologies, that she is trying to alter not places as an alternative concept against biopolitics, but kind of another possibility of understanding not only like human Western centric term politics and biopower, but instead looking into colonial landscape, extracted landscape, and to see also non-human elements like infrastructure, how those infrastructure are instrumentalizing violence, violation of climate justice, extraction that leads to dispossession of communities, and so on. So what Povinelli writes in her book really informs a lot in this region, what is going on since the end of Ottoman Empire. Landscapes is very important to understand how, especially in this region, how we can understand landscape beyond a pastoral and neutral representation, how militarization is very connected to landscape, especially here in Turkey. We are speaking about militarized landscape, like militarized infrastructure, like water dam. I will come back on that. But this all leads to a huge control and security on this region. Water control, that is about border control too, and also dispossession. That is forced eviction of villages and rescaling border cities and cities like Mardin, Nusaybin, and so on. So this is that is ongoing. It is contemporary violence with housing speculation, with construction market, with Turkish military really trying to control the borders from Iraq to Syria. And it's happening with controlling the forests, controlling the water, who has the access, and who decides the access, decides the border line also too. So this is how it is related. And I think I will prefer again Povinelli and Karabing, her video collective also, that I learned a lot about the relation between myths, how mythology and myths. I remember I used to teach mythology in the art history program when I was an assistant of my professor, and I had a totally different understanding of myths. Myths was something, mythology and myths was something, some archetype, heroes, god and goddess, and stories that was part of art history. And this was one of the important class, and we have to tell those stories, make connection with painting and sculpture and so on. But going deeper, that I started to learn with Gilgamesh film, that which I was not so much into aware of that. I mean, as also in Elizabeth's practice, that how colonialism, the history of the temporality, or the existence of temporality of ancestors, the relation with the landscape of ancestors, and the myths are so much connected. And then myths became so much also a political concept. It came for me, and I tried to understand how I can revitalize, especially in Mesopotamia, in this region where we are, that myths are mostly oppressed by nation states history, massacres of Assyrians, of Keldanis, of Armenians, of many communities that they are so little right now living around us in this village, in those villages here where I'm living, and how we can get back this heritage, but not in a very romantic and way of vitalization, and what I want to say also, not in a way of I will find a word, but more into like healing the communities that went through massacre, and also empower them, going back to their source, to their ancestors' history and oral histories and so on, and how it transfers into material and informs the future and creates kind of possibilities for future, for collective future. At least for me, in this region, this is very important for me. You see in the picture a stone extraction quarry in Mardin. It's a big mountain. It used to be a big mountain when I arrived, but it's nearly, this mountain will disappear in, I think, in 2 years. And why I follow this mountain, this extraction. There are so many extractive stone extraction quarries around the region, because there's a lot of housing around since 2014. There is a boom of housing market, which also relates in the cities like Diyarbakir, Mardin, and so on, a class representation of Kurdish society, community, urban society. You can ask me about that, we can come back, but this is very important to understand the rural parts of this region, and then the urban part, that I would say that Diyarbakir became urban in the 50s, the first nation state wave, and controlling also the Diyarbakir city. But then after 2015, it became a metropolis and a big city. And Mardin too, I since 7 years where I'm living, new housings, super expensive housing, even under conflict, when there were harsh conflict and physical violence going on, the housing market didn't stop, it continued. And there's a lot of, I mean, the ruralism lives in the urbanism, and urbanism is around rural. So there is no urban-rural division exactly that we see in Europe, for example. So it's a very interesting, fast, like in the Chinese example, a fast boom, fast urbanization, where is no urban culture exactly, but there is urbanization, as Henry Lefebvre wrote a lot, the differences. So there's a capitalist circulation, there is a materials production and circulation that is connected to extraction. Many of my colleagues in my team, in my collective, working on artistically or other way to see how Kurdish society is connected with that. I just want to say something. Those little mountain, when they are used, extracted for stone, they disappear, of course. And then what happens? We receive more dusk from Syria. My home is just looking to the Syrian border. It's 20 minutes drive by car. And when something happens with the wind, the dust comes more and more. And this also affects the air quality and air circulation in the city of Mardin. So there's a high-rise building right now and diminishing landscape, extraction, removal of landscape for extraction, and then it affects the climate, of course. I will come back on that. This is some of my groups of people, we are front of the quarry. But with one of my colleagues who used to be my master's student, who's a landscape architect, Zeynep, we did a lot of research on water dam around the region. And our primary argument was that these water dam has no ecological contribution to the region. What they do, they remove, rescale, and dispossess the Kurdish villages. They harm the flora, the plants and the flora, and they harm by disappearing archaeological heritage. They also harm the archaeological site, the heritage site. And for us, Rotterdam is more about tools of security and colonization, and actually controlling the path of the Kurdish movements members in the region, in the landscape. So it's a kind of a border control. And even officially, the government in the parliament meetings name it as security water dams. So this is one of the, let's say, infrastructure that plays as an agency in transforming the policy, setting the condition of state of exception, and that all leads to pushing the villages to the urban side and controlling the water that goes to Iraq, because Iraq and Syria, especially Iraq, Turkish government has a water issue, and it controls the water that flows down and up. So it can control the stream, it controls the stream, therefore. And the most important one is Ulusu Water Dam. And Ulusu Water Dam is actually a project from the very early time, from the 50s, that there was a kind of a controlling the Kurdish region. Islahat Fermanı is an Ottoman word. Islahat means normalizing. Ferman means agreement. So it was a kind of a coming from late Ottoman, and an aim, an agreement by Istanbul, by the governors, by the Sultan, and later by the nation-state governors, to control the southeast region. And the first control is, of course, applying language, like everything has to be in Turkish. Local communities cannot express themselves in their own language. And then applying a master plan in Diyarbakir, and then establishing water dam and in the region. So it's not a new project, I want to say. It comes from the beginning of nation state of Turkish Republic that goes to 50s and 60s, and it revitalized those water dams immediately. In the 80s was an issue, and now it's really like there are many water dams. And if you're interested in that issue, I can send this article that we published in Climate, Architecture and Planetary Imaginary, a book. And Zeynep has a nice master thesis about that in English also, that you can see that how climate transformation is also an outcome of security and colonial control and extraction. You see Hasan Cave here, the new Hasan Cave. I don't know if you see my arrow, Thomas. Do you see my arrow here? Yeah. So this is new Hasan Cave, and the old one is here. And that Hasan Cave used to be a village in the beginning of 20th century. And it is one of the important archaeological sites. By the way, there are many archaeological sites, Neolithical sites around this region, naturally. And where I'm looking for here, the photo that I took, I'm on a little hill on the east side of the region, where I'm near to a petrol oil extraction headquarters. The campus, I'm in the campus right now, in my campus home, I mean in the university campus near to Tigris River, and all our campus is surrounded with the machine that extracts petrol. And from the geologists, I learned that all this underneath the earth until Mosul is full of oil. And this is very important to understand that how it is extracted. There are many artists who worked on extraction recently, but I want to say that I think one of the first work was by Şener Özmen, Kurdish artist, and also I think Fikret Atay and Halil Altındere, who pointed out this extraction, how it is extracting the landscape, but it's not only about extracting goods for the country, but is also denying communities, extracting their lands, and that harms also the life habitus of the communities. I want to give a small information about the petrol. This oil is extracted, I learned. It goes by, I think, 80,000 barrel. I don't know what is the kilo in Turkish, maybe I can find later. It's been extracted a day, and it goes to Diyarbakir. From Diyarbakir, it goes to Siverek, near Urfa, another city, is transported. From those cities, it goes to Iskenderun, Alexandria, the old city near the sea in Turkey, the East Mediterranean, near Antioch, and then is loaded and out from the country. I learned that we don't use this petrol. I was so in shock. So much petrol is extracted a day and is immediately, I think, is being sold to US. And US in Mediterranean, or other companies sells to Israel, and it goes to probably to Tel Aviv and other places. So it's very interesting to see the circulation also, that something is extracted, and I was thinking it's our petrol we are using, because, and then I thought, oh my God, petrol is so expensive in Turkey, and if it is so extracted, why the petrol is not cheap, you know? So I understood that this whole dissemination of goods goes in different borders and different markets. I'm not so knowledgeable about that, but I was asking around, and I interviewed some people who are retired and worked is a Kurdish village, who works in this petrol station, which is whole half of the city of Batman is constructed of from the 50s. Then in the 30s, the petrol was found here. So this is also another kind of power. I mean, petrol sits on the power game here between Iraq and Turkey also, and US. So come back here, Hasan Cave. This is a new settlement, new housing. The village was here in the other side. In 7 November 2019, I was there in the village. That day was the last day of the village. The military and Turkish government asked the village to empty the village, and they destroyed the village. And it happened 6 p.m. I mean, they had a time to leave the village until 6 p.m. And it happened after that. And immediately they removed the 2019, 2020. Remember, COVID started. And even under COVID, they managed to build a new city. Amazing. And the water level went up, and the whole archaeological site is under water now. Just a page from NASA. NASA made a case news on Hasan Cave last year, showing here this part is the previous part before 2019. I'm here, my house, I'm now somewhere here, yeah. So it's just, I think, half an hour by car to come here. And this part is satellite view that NASA took. This part is after from 2020. So they wanted to show the differences of how the water came up. And this is new Hasan Cave, and this is an old Hasan Cave. It's very important. Of course, you won't get from the film. We shot here the film and so on. But I'm trying to tell a story which has nothing to do with Gilgamesh, but is all about Gilgamesh, maybe the other way around. And this is the image of the water dam. I took I think the date is wrong here. I took it later, but no, it was built. They were building it. This is when 2019 is true. Yes, it's right. Yeah, these were like half. Now is built totally with restaurant and supermarket and so on. but all COVID, they worked to have it. This is recent that I got in March 2020. And this is Hasan Cave entrance. This was a village. And the caves are very important here too. Many artists are interested with caves, and they're working also with caves. The caves were used to be houses, dwellings for the people who lived until most of the families, until the eviction. And you can see, this is very interesting photo for me, that you see the stone geologically so old, and then you see the new cement, and this whole combination is so strange for me. It's so violent. I feel the violence here always. There are many things happened. In 2016, there was a lot of urban conflict in Diyarbakır, in Nusaybin, and Kızıltepe. Mardin was little bit. We were in Mardin. I was in Mardin that time. The reason was that the younger generation of the Kurdish movement went on the street, and they started squatting and occupying the neighborhoods with the inhabitants, and a war started, an urban warfare started between Turkish military and the young fighters. And it was not in Mardin. In Mardin didn't happen. I presume Mardin is more an Arabic city, and Kızıltepe is more Kurdish, Nusaybin is Kurdish, and Diyarbakır in Kurdish. So we saw more in those cities. And this is one of the family neighborhood. I'm sorry, Abdul Kadir neighborhood. It consists of three small neighborhood, a big neighborhood. And my student was here, one of my students, an architect, and he had to submit his studio project to me, and he couldn't go out from the villages. He was stuck in one of those houses with his family, and he couldn't connect. He had to send his diploma project, and he couldn't send his project because there was no enough internet, because there was no electricity, and he had to charge his computer with the charger electricity from a car, and then try to connect, and then the war, the kind of conflict was going on, shooting and this and that. And some families, they carved tunnel and doors against the inner wall in order to connect through their garden and so on. I was so curious. I went to the neighborhood during the conflict, and I don't know how I went in, and I found my student, and I saw the people, how they were trying to build a kind of resistance. But unfortunately, they lasted, I think, 2-3 months. And after the military went in, emptied the space remained like that, totally destroyed, bombed, and so on. And then I went every 4 months to understand the transformation. And then it was totally removed by Turkish government. It was a tabula rasa. And then immediately construction started. And then in 2019, November, I saw those luxury houses. So it was interesting to see that how urban conflict, urban warfare sometimes goes together with housing speculation, housing market. I was really confused that is it a resistance that was going on there? Was it a real war that was urban war, that two groups was fighting each other? Was it something really defending their rights of community and their rights as a Kurdish community there? Or is how those urban warfare functioning now in our region, and also other places like in Pakistan, in China, in other places, I don't know, in the Middle East, that how immediately housing market functions and goes together with war, and after post-war, and even during war, even pre-war, I would say, that justifies the situation, or war justifies the new housing market. Of course, these are luxury apartments. It raises is very high price. The Turkish government asked the families, Kurdish families, who migrated from this neighborhood to come back. And of course, they gave it, they offered houses with mortgage, of course, not for free. It happened same in Hasan Cave. They evicted, I mean, people were evicted, and then they offered houses, but with mortgage. I mean, still they have to pay. So they were never fully compensated. How we just want to have a break, you know, how we approach. I mean, I always have a lot of references, and in such research, I want to read everything, all of us, you know. I'm sure you are all the same, but if you are working on something, you read philosophy, you read social science, you read many things, and all is about how I can approach the episteme front of me differently. My aim, I mean, my intention is, I'm a bit an analytical person. I really want to have a very naked episteme to see. And but then I have a lot of totally opposite. I have also a desire for to understand phenomenologies and the whole cosmologies behind the phenomenologies. So maybe I have a different astrological star, very opposite, that has a different, totally opposite understanding of how to form the knowledge, how to produce the knowledge. In this region, when I came first, I was so much focused on urban studies because I'm coming from urban studies, and I don't know so much about archaeology, and I'm an art historian, but not in a historian way. I'm more contemporary art historian, more focusing on contemporary art. And this is why before moving this region, I really never looked carefully to archaeology and the politics of archaeology, or the representation politics of archaeology. I read a nice book that changed my approach of artifacts and landscape also. I mean, landscape here means I had a kind of a idea of landscape in infrastructure more defined with urban studies, from Henry informed by Henry Lefebvre and David Harvey, and recent anthropologists, colonial, Catherine Yusuf, Elizabeth Povinelli, some kind of geographers and anthropologists that working in such field. But archaeology was something that I didn't know so much. And when I started to live here, I was working in Dara village. I was working other landscape and villages. They were mainly archaeological sites. And I read a book called Scrambling the Past, or Invading the Past. I can find the book. This book was edited by Zeynep Bahrani, archaeologist, and another Greek archaeologist, and Zeynep Çelik, a Turkish archaeologist, and historian Ethem Eldem, who is very interesting, all interesting scholars. But generally, they are not so much my reading this. But when I read this, they were telling the Ottoman Empire politics on the politics of representation of archaeology, and the colonial, archaeology as a colonial extraction, and controlling the site, and owning the heritage. And this was very interesting for me to start to think about archaeology. I started to read a lot of books on Mesopotamia. Suddenly, it was in 2015, which I was reading as a hobby. To understand. And one of the book, Mark van der Meerop, Antik Yakın Doğu'nun Tarihi, the Near Eastern history, the history of the Near Eastern Antique, 3000 before Christ, until he finished this period, 323, the death of the great Alexander. This is his argument that is finished that time. So this book especially, it gives a lot of information about the urban economics of Ur and Uruk. How those cities were managed economically. I was so interested I was reading first time, and I was a little bit in shock. And then I started to go through Zeynep Bahrani, which they are couple. And she wrote a lot of books about Babylonia, the female representation in Babylonia, Mesopotamia, and so on. And one day, something very strange happened. They both came to Mardin, and by coincidentally, I met them. And when they told their name, I was so surprised. I said, "Hey, I know you both because I read your stuff." And they told me we are doing a project called Mapping Mesopotamia, a digital archive mapping until Nineveh, where Mosul and Duhok, this whole Iraq, and then Upper Mesopotamia, the old artifact. And we had a nice discussion. Especially we had a very nice kind of a small seminar about the ontologies of things, artifacts, how it is, what is the politics of preservation, what is the politics of accumulating it, and how it is so much directed by European hegemonic archaeology and art history that we all know from, I mean, other like Foucault and other thinkers. But it was interesting to see how they understand Mesopotamia and how they're putting Mesopotamian culture and understanding and artifact, the politics of artifact differently. And something was that Zainab was saying, landscape is part of the artifact. I mean, taking the artifact in the museum and presenting it in the museum, I would say most of the artifacts from this region are in different museums in abroad, in England and so on. And she says, oh, I mean, many in Anatolia. And she says it's a kind of colonial way to take the artifact from its temporality, from its landscape, and put totally into an institution. And this is already a kind of a big extraction and colonial act that, and she believes that those structure has to be understood with the landscape together. So I understood, I learned something new. I tried to then move to Ian Hodder. Ian Hodder is the archaeologist who did excavate Çatalhöyük, one of the oldest Neolithic sites in mid-Anatolia. And he wrote also several books. I think I really recommend those books to read. It's very interesting that he speaks about entanglement. That is exactly a similar wording concept by Karen Barat, is borrowing from Donna Haraway and quantum physics. So it's interesting to see that how artifact for Ian Hodder is in archaeology is defined. But the most important was that how I can see pastoral practice related with Kurdish community. What does it mean, and how they express themselves? They have a specific music expression tradition called dengbej that people, the singers, made up with poetic way, in a poetic way, songs, but it's not exactly song, but it's not exactly poem writing, saying, but it's a kind of in between practice of oral performance. So it was interesting for me to really think together and also go beyond the constraints and conflict that the Kurdish community and public is in Turkey. For me also, James Scott, the anarchist and professor in agrarian profession on agrarian history, agriculture, his work is very important for me. Against the Grain, a deep history of the early state is very interesting to understand how states did function in Mesopotamian culture, how the city-state was so important. Of course, we always know about Greek Ionian state, city-state. We know about the urbanization of Europe and so on. But it is interesting to read James Scott, how he questions the culture, agricultural culture, communities, and production of grains, and how it is related to slavery, taxes, labor, and that makes all the state for him in the Mesopotamian villages. Karan Barat is very inspiring for me to really question myself. What I said in the beginning, this what I called myself the naked episteme, the how we can understand. I'm coming from social science. I'm also in art, and then I'm very much in activism with collective people. But how this all, which has a different epistemological regime and ontological regime, comes together and creates a different kind of knowledge and practice, and how I can describe that. In that sense, Karen Barat's work helps me a lot. This queering way of understanding the performativity of knowledge. It gives me a lot of freedom to this define. I just want to read about, I just got something, it is interesting in regarding Mesopotamia to understand. Agroecology of the Early State is the fourth chapter of James Scott. And I like very much that he puts the Neolithical grain on the middle, and then he tries to explain how farming, sedentism, irrigation, and towns were built. And there is always in the history, we know that we were nomad, and then we became sedentary came out, and we started with agriculture. We settled. You know, this is a kind of a usual history about in geology, in history, and so on. And James Scott says, no, it was not like that, so clear and determinist. It was more like totally various and heterogeneous. I just want to read this part, if you don't mind. Please read with me. Just wanted to read loudly. So in this book, he says something very interesting. He defines characteristic about this urban state, the stateness of state. I propose to privilege those that point to territoriality and a specialized state apparatus, walls, building walls of the urban spaces like Uruk and Uru or something, tax collection, and officials. By such standards, there is no doubt that the states of Uruk is firmly in place by 3200 BCE. Nissen calls the period from 3200 to 2800 BCE, the era of high civilization in the Near East, during which Babylonia was without doubt the region that produced the most complex economic, political, and social orders. Not incidentally, the iconic founding acts of establishing a Sumerian polity was the building of a city wall. A wall at Uruk was in fact built in 3300 and 3000 BCE, when Gilgamesh was thought by some to have regened. Uruk was the pioneer of state form that would be replicated throughout the Mesopotamian alluvium by roughly 20 other competing city-states or peer polities. These polities were small enough that one could walk from the center of most to the other boundary in a day. So I think I found very interesting for me. I continuously trying to learn from James Scott. When I first read his books, his first book was about South Asia, kind of an anarchist history of South Asia, and then slowly it was more about Chinese agrarian economy and agriculture and some other related to collectivity, solidarity, and social movements writings. And then I read about state. He has a book, and then this book was really like, I'm trying to relearn. It helps me to relearn some reading the history differently, that he is also trying to argument. I also drawing my own map of research. This is a kind of a research map that is a very academic, my own academic, how I navigate in this territory in, let's call this Mesopotamia, learning the archaeology, going to the matter through Ian Hodder and Karim Barat, coming back to artistic research and how this whole informing. And then there are realities that I am witness, I'm part of it in the physical space. And how this field, this territory, this region, Upper Mesopotamia, cities, Mardin, Nusaybin, whatever you called, how it is so much related to each other. This is a kind of a map that I did in 2018 to try to understand my own practice and words and concept around that. I went a little bit to China also, and then I tried to also bring some maps together. So it's very relational, very rhizomatic, and then I have also created with some of my, I had a workshop in last month, a few months ago in May, and I tried to create a kind of a map that is more like a little bit in order, but this was more together with some artists. I did that, who I did run a workshop in Ashkal Alwan. I was invited to run a workshop, and this workshop was 1 month, and I call it again tigress phenomenologies. And I wanted to try something with this workshop. First, as how artistic research methodologies navigate in such places, in such region, how we deal with non-human materialization, the colonial method, how violence is it's very front of us, and how we have to grasp it first and put it in our and how we can put a meaning, and how we can see the outcome, how we can represent the outcome of such a. Everything is layered and is not so easy, I think, at least for me, to understand. And I needed with some artists to do this. Tigress phenomenologies, artifact, plant, cycled, exile, was I mean, 50 people registered, 50 artists from Afghanistan to Palestine, to Latin America, to Canada, to Iraq, from Beirut, because it was online. We did run it first. I mean, Ashkal Alwan did first time online because of COVID. And I said, okay, this is my try, this workshop. I will try to bring that looks very messy, this whole knowledge production and practical experience, and how to bring it together, those practice. And I was very lucky. There's all 50 people, artists, filmmakers, were in the similar practice in the Amazon forest, in the Afghan war, in the Palestinian West Bank landscape, and so on, and different territories, but same questions. And then my question was, what can artistic and architectural experience reveal about, and how can they embody the voice of apocalyptic landscapes? How can the effect of surpassing disaster be dug out and memorized through artistic and architectural methodologies? These were some questions that, direct to question that I was interested, and all the presentation is actually about that, what I'm trying. Exile is also another layer. I mean, artifact is the whole understanding about the artifacts of non-humans element, and land is about extraction and colonialism and possession and dispossession, property. Cycles is the whole climate cycles, and exile is a real case that many people were exiled. And I used a lot the Kurdish author who was exiled from Diyarbakir to Sweden and lived most of his life in Sweden, Mehmet Uzun, and died in Diyarbakir. And he has a book, The Cry of Tigress, is in Kurdish and Turkish, recently translated to Turkish. So I had a chance to read in Turkish. But he uses a lot the metaphor of Gilgamesh, and a lot of metaphor of using tigress as a subjectivity in the whole, as a subjectivity who witness who did witness the massacres around the years, 1,000 years around this river, that what did happen to Armenians, what did happen to Kurds, what did happen to Keldanis, and so on. The whole exiles, the whole possessions, dispossessions, and forced evictions and violence, disasters. I can share the web. We have a Padlet, and you can see all the move, and many of my presenters, my participants, I'm sorry, I asked them to put their work also, so you can see in the Padlet. I can show later. I want to show few examples. Thomas, I think I have time, isn't it? I have few slides left. I have of.
You're talking for 1 hour, so.
Oh my God. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
A little bit.
I will finish in 15 minutes. I'm sorry. Yeah.
Okay. Well.
Okay. And this is a video archive with my collective. We are doing small videograms, interviewing evicted people, observing the urban transformation. You can find this archive online. We're uploading it online, and we call it residual space. The space, I mean, spaces that has been resued after disasters, after any kind of disasters. I think I wanted to show some examples, not only personally my practice, but for my friends and colleagues. This is one of the archives. This is an artist, Kurdish artist, Leyla Keskin, and her work, video work about, you can see about extraction for buildings and building. I can share the video with the Vimeo. Another artist works a lot about climate and earth, that he uses here a kind of a plastic ready-made, his altar in a small nice landscape. Mehmet Ali is working a lot on such issues. And Rojda Tuğrul, another Kurdish artist, she works a lot on Tigris and Fırat rivers. And this is eco-site, border infrastructures, and dispossession. These all knots are water dams in the borderline in the region. And Rojda has many work like that, that she's focusing on those rivers, our landscape of the rivers, and ecological site. I mean, like genocide, eco site. I follow, I think, I will share this presentation. You can have it and you can read more, maybe what I put here. I think Catherine Yusuf is very inspiring to understand the commons and this whole, this planetary sensibility, how this whole knowledge makes sense from this region. You know, I'm telling about something about Mesopotamia, I'm telling something about extraction, and I'm telling about the political current history. It's not so easy to grasp in 1 hour, I think, but I like very much to, when I think, read Catherine Yusuf's work, The Politics of Anthropocene, a tiny book, which is so clear and nice about the history of colonialism and racism, how it is, goes together with the politics of Anthropocene era. And she says, a planetary sensibility necessarily involves the consideration of the scale relation between planetary life and subjective life. And it is in this site that the commons is both invoked and enacted as a communality across forms of organic and inorganic life. I mean, this is, I think, very important part that I feel it so much has meaning with this person that I became friend during shooting the film, who is an Yazidi woman who left the village in the 70s, went to Germany to work. They are migrant workers in Germany. Most of the Yazidi village and Christian Arabs in this region, they left their village because of the conflict, Turkish and Kurdish conflict. And some of them left already in during Armenian genocide, because they were afraid, because they were Christian or they didn't have religions like Yazidis. And here you see Hanefi, she comes every summer back, stays in her village. And here I asked her, what are you doing? And she said, I'm honoring the stones. And this is a kind of installation we do for our cemeteries, she said. Yazidi cemeteries are very important. and they are building as a sculpture there, an installation there, cemeteries, and so it's totally different than Muslim and Christian cemeteries. And I think this renaissance very much what Catherine Yusuf was trying to say about planetary life and subjective life and how this comes together. I think in these rituals, I feel that comes together. And this is just naked photos. I just took those photos that time. And this is the village we shoot partially the Gilgamesh, or film. And Dara, we spent a lot of time in Dara shooting the film. And Dara is a village that I work a lot, is a Hellenistic village. It became a Roman garrison to keep the border against the Persian. And there was a Persian-Greek war here, because this is why they say it's called Dara, comes from Darius. We don't know. But it is very strange. This village was extracted by my, found and excavated by my professor in Istanbul. And he went there 30 years. And you can see a lot of artifact that is being used from Hellenistic period, Roman period, Byzantine period, in the people's house. This is a Kurdish village right now, and the whole artifact is referencing totally a past history of Mesopotamia. And the village is very much the border, 10 minutes to Syrian border. This is a kind of another view of the housing units. It's very organic, the whole village, the housings. Most of the housings are sitting on the Roman columns or water cisterns, and the village was famous for controlling the water. And still, the village controls the upper village, mountain village water, and they sharing the water. But that time, during the ancient period, Hellenistic period, and Roman period, the water was controlled with Syria, for Syria. And again, it was a border there, again, like now. So we are in the house of an old Kurdish lady, Hala, that is our friend or colleague, that who helped us in the film, shooting the film. And this house is, I think, is built on a, probably it was a Roman villa before. And the housing, you can see I did a lot of visual, we're working a lot since years in this village. We have a large collection of visually mapping, collecting the artifact, I mean, photographing and like typical archaeological, art historical research we are doing. And we did a lot of research on mapping the olive trees, mapping the archaeological site, mapping the public spaces, and so on. UNESCO wants to, and Turkish government and UNESCO wants to decide as a UNESCO heritage site, which will lead the eviction of the villagers. This is why we and the villagers, we don't want UNESCO to come here and decide for the site. And this is a house, sometimes with architects. This is one of my students used to be in the master, Ashraf from Damascus. You don't see the gift, is a gift actually, is a gift, but it doesn't move here. I don't know why. We constructed one of the housing by drawing, and under this house is another house. Most of the houses are layered. And this is, again, I want to remind you back what I explained, the village, the city, the neighborhood in Cizre and here Nusaybin, how it changes, how from such built environments is together with such a very, like 20 minutes further, 1 hour further, half an hour further, other Kurdish villages that are dealing with different kind of urbanization process and built environments. I mean, politics of built environments related to urban warfare. And before, it's more like the site, the heritage, and how heritage is, heritage claim is leading to transform the built heritage, which is again about controlling the communities and in sites. I think that you watch the film, and women are very important in this region for me. I collaborate with a lot of women. Here on the left, you see in Diyarbakir, Kurdish women producing collectively bread. Every street, they have this, even in luxury apartment new sites, neighborhoods, in the corner, they have those oven, let's say, and they're producing collectively their, like 2-3 women comes together and they do a lot of bread and they share. It's a kind of a public space, let's say, even in the cities, in the luxury spaces that they exist. You see Hanefi honoring the stone. You see a Yazidi refugee near Mardin that I worked a lot in this camp, who produced their own corridor or own public spaces. In the left, you see a dispossessed another Kurdish lady who produced her own cultivation is in a precarious way everyday life. I think there are different kind of powerful, precarious, but powerful women in this region. It's very inspiring for me, and I think this was very inspiring for me that I wanted to see this empowerment in the characters in the film too. Totally weak but empowered, and so this is why I want to close here. But I can share also what I said, all the books and everything. But I just wanted to bring my knowledge and tell something about Gilgamesh, which is not Gilgamesh whole my presentation, but which leads my research, how I arrived to the film, and how I arrived to the understanding of the Gilgamesh and Mesopotamia. Thank you very much for listening.
Thank you very much, Pelin Tann. It was very interesting talk. I didn't see the film yesterday, but the students did, so I'm curious about their question, and I'm opening the Q&A. Anybody, any question?
I will put some reference, because then you can go and search, the student can go and do some more research. I can send also books and other things what I mentioned. Can helpful maybe.
Thank you very much for the talk. And I'd be interested if you could tell us just a little bit about how was your process in adapting the book, the epos for the film. How did you work with it to translate it into the script or the text for the film? Because I told us a bit yesterday that you were together when you were reading the book and translating, but how did you work actually with the text, and how did you convert it into the film? Maybe how was the creative process working with the epos?
Yeah, I think I can reply. I think Anton can reply too. Together, for me it was a multiple process, not a linear. I mean, the first book, a Sumerian book I read, was the Sumerian translated to Turkish. We have a Sumerian department in Ankara, in the Ankara University, and there are some famous Sumerian scholars. I read one book that is a tablet by a teacher, Sumerian teacher. The tablets are in the Archaeological Museum of Istanbul. And this Sumerian teacher tells about his life and Sumerian culture and so on. I was very shocked first when I read that. And then I understood a little bit Uruk, because he was living in Uruk. And even he drew the map of Uruk in the tablet. So it was very the first lesson about Sumerian and Uruk for me. And then the colonial history, because in the later tablet he was telling that how Akkadian colonized them. I'm sorry. How Akkadians are colonized them, and they started to teach in Akkadian and 30% and left Sumerian language a little bit, and he was so angry about that. Also, he was writing about in the tablet. So then I realized the city first. I went through the urban culture to understand Sumerian and Uruk, and my reading was mostly reading Gilgamesh through that. how Enkidu and Gilgamesh in the epic, through my approach, my interpretation was that how civilization, uncivilized, was connected to being urban and not urban, which is normally a modernist approach, modernist definition. But it was strange in the epic to see such approach, that how Enkidu is being civilized through sex, and then to love and sex and so on, and then brought by the woman to the city, and then he wants to approach, and he's invited to approach to learn urban culture and become civilized and become urban, and I was this was very affected me to understand how those characters are presenting a different kind of story for me about urbanization and urban culture and civilization, what civilized humans and so on is. And then the other reading of me was more the friendship, how the friendship does matter, and that leads to the search of immortality. And I think I read it more in that way. Anton maybe tell his own perspective. He was reading in different way, I think, than me. But then we were trying to understand a lot the role of the goddess and gods, and the small epics in the stories inside the epics. For me, the walk in the walking underworld, when Gilgamesh is entering the underworld and walks, metaphorically, it's very strong for me. And I was very inspired by that, because I read Mehmet Uzun's novel, which is about Kurdish movement, and it's about a guerrilla woman, female, who walks. He refers to Gilgamesh in the novel, a totally different perspective reading if you live here with a kind of a history of Kurdish history. So I was interpreting in a different way. But what we did technically, maybe Anton will later tell also what he was inspired with his cosmos research, and the role of the goddess, and what goddess and the human being represents in a very ontological way of understanding the life cycle and so on. And the other thing was also I have a agriculture bulletin, agriculture document by a Sumerian farmer. This was translated from Sumerian to English. And it's one of the oldest existing agricultural texts written by a farmer to his son, how he should control the water and the agriculture land, what to cultivate, which time, and so on. And this was also like reading to James Scott, for me, was also that how landscape and agriculture is being understood in that epic. What is the meaning in Sumerian? It's very strong in Sumerian culture, and how it is, technically speaking, coming back with our research, we basically were reading, by coincidence also, a little bit coincidence, because Anton said, oh, I'm reading Google. I said, it was in my hand. I was reading too. And I remember that we just started to read, and then maybe Anton can correct me, but we started to take to focus on some passages, some small stories that we are thinking is interesting for us. Yeah, and then we took them out and then rewrote some parts, and Anton did a lot of work on connecting, and also using, I think, the ancient Egypt. Also, we used the Book of Death, isn't it, Anton? Some few passages from there. But in the meanwhile, we did a lot of, I did read so stupid things, I think, without without analytical way. And Anton did a lot too about reading the goddess, trying to understand the meaning of astrology and the cosmology, the cycle of planet and season, and what word coincides which words, how it is transferred to Greek mythology, how it is transferred to now to our current day usage. It was, I think, very important to understand Ishtar, her role, the god of sun, the role, how they are contemplate now with different kind of civilizations. So what they really telling us, those stories, going beyond their symbolic meaning, going beyond their nice stories. What are the archetypes? What kind of story they're trying to tell about humanities? I think this was more the aim that we try to understand. And as you know, in the epic, Gilgamesh is a strong, macho king, ruler, builder, and so on. And it was our idea to turn it totally opposite to a female character. Yeah. Okay, Anton went away. Okay, so I want to. So this was a little bit Juliana or process. We were lucky. I was in US in Bart. The COVID started, so we spent a lot of time together reading the book. Sometimes reading. I mean, we learned the book by heart, and then it was a little bit also not only research, enjoying. You know, I became addicted, Anton, to like researching 24 hours. Maybe it was something like escaping from COVID. I don't know what was it, but sitting in home, I went back to Turkey again, all summer, all winter, reading about Sumerian, this and that. I mean, we don't want to be Sumerian historians, but it was a kind of maybe this whole pandemic, you know, this climate disasters and so on. It was strange to go back to Mesopotamian mythology and cosmology to read. It was something that we were reading, something contemporary knowledge, contemporary stuff. And this is, I think, made our film script more different, I think. That firstly, we decided also that we don't want to have we like to have this Greek tragedies, you know, this woman standing on the front and they are dramatic. I mean, we like that, but then at the same time, we don't want a theater piece at all. But then we are very inspired by Pasolini and Parayoev, Armenian director, and their symbolic representations in their films. We went through those films, we watched those films, you know, we went our favorite, those directors, and we just so much inspired by their symbolism, by their representation in their films. And this was mostly like a back research for our films. And then, yeah, we were so careful. We don't want to do a theater piece, but then we want something like a moving image. And then we want to have everyone woman, like a story told by woman. And then at the end, you see images of apartments and buildings of Mardin, in contemporary Mardin. Maybe probably Uruk was that time too. That building was so important. Building wall was, I mean, urbanization was so important that time. So it's not a modern technological thing, but it's a representation of power and how civilization is being represented. The power of civilization is I mean, the power of representation is still the building, you know, showing. I mean, Gilgamesh presents his power through building. They say that he was so powerful, he was ruled, he saved the woman, he saved the man, he built those walls, he was a great builder, he built those cities. You know, the power is represented through construction abilities. You know, this is very strange, interesting, but isn't it right now the same, you know, that how the power of architecture is very much related with the power of capitalism and power of violence and power of what I showed, how urban warfare goes with housing speculation, housing market. Still, it is so much connected. I mean, it's very interesting for me to gather, you know, and also break this epic symbolism in the end of the film with contemporary images. I think this was also that we wanted to jump, cut this this symbolic way. Yeah, I don't know. I can speak more, but.
Yeah, thank you. Well, Anton didn't really want us to give much feedback yesterday after we saw it, so that you hear it as well.
Yeah.
But I love the film. I think it's fantastic.
Thank you very much.
And also the cut at the end that you say, for me, it happens like after Gilgamesh loses the branch that was to immortality.
Yeah.
So it was really for me dramatic to say.
Yeah.
She lost the key to immortality, and now a different city stands there.
And Juliana, technically speaking, like most of the scenes are exactly in the epic, like the bread scene, the encounter with Ustabishtim, the bread scene, finding the. I mean, he says with his wife, go and find this plant, and then on the way he goes back. He goes to wash himself. He put the plants. All those main stories are from the epic. I mean, from the epic, yeah.
And you said so after all this research, you were just intuitively selecting which parts of the story from the epic are strong for you.
I think
that's how you constructed
this. Yes. I think the intuition here is that I am, as you see my presentation, I'm coming from a different source. I'm from this region. I'm more into territorial research and so on. And Anton was coming more from research of cosmos and cosmology, cosmism, and he was more getting reference from the Russian cosmism, and which was is not my access of bibliography, because I don't know Russian, I don't read Russian, and I read Russian cosmism, the book that they produced, but it's a little bit far still, because I'm not coming from that culture. I understand their technological determinism, questioning, and this cosmos, what Anton is doing with his films of cosmos, I know very well. I wrote about the films also as a scholar, for example, but he's coming more from a different perspective. But somehow we were thinking, we were in all the decisions, we were instinctively, it was everything collective common decision, Juliana, very strangely. I mean, coming from a different way, of course, researching together. Some of the scenes I'm more influenced, more affected. I interpret differently, he interpreted differently, but then it comes together that we really had always collective, I mean, without speaking, we give the common decision, we just understand how we want to do. We just get it, understand. And this is very interesting with him, because he's more an artist, I'm more an academic, and we have a different references. But then the imaginary, what we have in our front of our eyes, is a collective imaginary, and of course, it's not that I live in this region, I know those people. I think we were also very lucky approaching the landscape, approaching the people. I mean, we just went to the Yazidi village. I just met this woman there, and this woman was asking, "What are you doing here?" We said, "We have to do a film on astrological stars. We have to shoot some." She just got us, because she's a Yazidi. They have a cosmology, and they have a cosmology of which is different than religious. Religious, I mean, it's a belief, but it's a different cosmology. And for her, it was so normal what we were shooting, and I think we were in the right region, also right territory to do this film. And when we approach people and the landscape, it was just available, I think, for us too. It was a right match, and in that sense, I don't know if it is a lack or it is a preparation. We prepared, I think we worked a lot. We worked almost 2 years for that, 1.5 years, and every day we worked. I mean, we worked a lot. And I think maybe it was not only the availability, it was maybe the right match that all work came. But I think the cosmism research by Anton was very much referencing, supporting a lot his research, also the film, I think. But it was, some people said it was very different film that we did from the last films that we tried, and also from his films that one of my friends was telling me. It's not important, but it's interesting that, because Juliana, we are not professional. You learn by doing it, and when we did this film, we sensed that, oh, we learned a bit more, if you do the next film, I think we will be better, and so on and so on. I mean, we are not so professional in film, we have ideas, and we are researchers. We work on that. We have an imaginary that we want to reach, and it's generally for me, research is necessary. Artistic research is all about that mixture of this naked episteme, I will say, but is also this phenomenologies, the new non-human, human relational phenomenologies, not only human-based 20th century experience, bodily experience of phenomenologies, but more a relational phenomenologies of methodology. And I think this is makes the whole thing more a picture. Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for the question.
Other questions to Pelin?
I would have one. Thank you very much for the research. I learned a lot, and I would be happy to receive the slides. I saw that in your mind map you had geontologies, and I wonder if you could go a little bit more in depth what you were researching for that movie in that field.
Yeah. Geontology is a term especially by Elisabeth Povinelli. Geology and ontology and geo-ontopower. And she has a nice introduction in her book, geontology book. I think I can even share this book, but he's trying in this book, like I couldn't find it, but I can send the book. I have the PDF. I have all the PDFs for free. And this academic work, it's so expensive, the books. We don't have money to buy anyway. And in the first chapter, she starts with a kind of criticizing biopolitics, the term by Michel Foucault and Agamben, and this whole Western European knowledge, philosophy, and social science, that it is very human-based, human perspective. And she also clearly says that she doesn't want to create a contra term by geontology, but she says that a non-human perspective of ontologies that creates power relation and relational territories does matter. I mean, it's important to understand, especially in the neoliberal world. And she has some terms like concept like virus. One chapter is about virus, but it's not COVID, it's about SARS. If you read now, it makes so much sense with COVID. And then another metaphoric word is desert. And she basically criticized also in biopolitics. It's a kind of a philosophical tradition that the Gaia and Zoe is so separated. I mean, the death and the living, the border between death and living is so separated in the Western ontology and philosophy, thinking, and so on. And she thinks that biopolitics is something that is, even in Agamemnon's state of exception, is about life and death, you know. And this harsh separation between vitalism, death, and I mean, defining everything through contra death, something that is not living, you know, is for her is something, if I interpret right, is killing the vitalism, you know. What is the possibilities of animism? What is the possibilities of vitalism? You know, if we go through biopolitics, that is very much disciplined, experienced by modern societies, we almost losing the animistic possibilities and the possibility of vitalism. And this is, of course, for her, is prevented by colonialism. And colonialism is related to Anthropocene because of extraction. But Katrin Yusuf is referencing that Anthropocene is already started with colonialist approaches of Europe that was going to Latin America, to Africa, and New World and other islands in Indian Ocean to exchange goods, extract gold and diamond and whatever, and slavery. So it's everything is part of Anthropocene, climate justice, and is related to that. And this is why Povinelli gives a wider understanding, not only about biopolitics by using geontology, but also geontopower, but also understanding infrastructure like water dam, which is an agency that creates its own policy between politics, government, municipality, companies, and communities, and is an active form, is an active agency infrastructure. What Keller Easterling, actually the architectural theorist, writes, is an active form infrastructure. This infrastructures, and this is very interesting to read through Povinelli as we want to understand how those figures, she says, she calls figures, plays, you know, she wants to create new figures, like desert, virus, the animist, you know, the animist, maybe, or Gilgamesh or Enkidu are the animists in our film, you know. And for Povinelli, these figures are very important, that she uses also in Karabin Video Collective, retelling the story, decolonial story with animistic practice. And I think I like her Karabin films a lot. And is of course this moving image, what she does is more like mixture of realistic imaginary and fictive imaginary. So this is all I can say. I can go long, but I mean, I don't want to lecture. Almost I lectured long.
Are there any other questions? Because it's quite late where Pelin is talking, almost 10 o'clock there.
Yeah.
So please, maybe last question, that we will not keep Pelin so late.
I don't have I don't want to hold us up, but Pelin, could I ask would it be possible to email you, because I'm trying to get hold of a book on your other research. Would it be okay if I contact you privately?
Yes, I wrote my email address.
Great, thank you.
And I can send, if you need books and so on, I can email you if you are interested. You know, Povinelli's book, I can send PDF and
please email to me and I will share it.
I will do that. Yeah. This could be interesting.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay, so if there's no other questions, we would like to really thank
you very much. I hope it was useful in your program. Thank you very much for your questions also, and hospitality.
Okay, greeting you from Prague.
Bye-bye.
Thanks a lot. Bye.
Thanks a lot. Thanks a